We have a lot to cover in today's video, including the latest offseason trade talk. Today we're focusing on teams like Montreal. We're talking about the Ottawa Senators and the New York Rangers. Plus, could Dakota Joshua end up with the Maple Leafs, a team who actually drafted him before he made the NHL? We'll discuss that possibility. Plus, we have some other news regarding some potential free agents heading over to Europe. We have a coaching change on the staff of the Minnesota Wild. And, of course, lots more action from the Stanley Cup playoffs. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to talk about today. Let's start with the latest goings on with the Stanley Cup playoffs. Of course, tonight we have Game 5 between the Edmonton Oilers and the Dallas Stars. The series is tied up at 2 games apiece. I know one player that everybody's kind of waiting to see what happens with here is defenseman Chris Tanev of Dallas, who blocked a shot in the last game in the second period and did not finish the rest of the game. He was seen afterwards in a walking boot. But that doesn't always mean for sure they're injured and out long term. Sometimes I've seen players wear the walking boot just to kind of help, precaution, make sure it doesn't get any worse, and kind of, avoids, kind of protects it a bit, you could say, while they're, waiting to see how things settle down with swelling or if there's any breaks or what have you. So last night after last game, he was seen in a walking boot, but apparently today there's some reports saying he was walking into the arena without it. So I don't know. I know Peter DeBoer said he's a game time decision, certainly banged up, but Tanev is one tough customer. It's going to take a lot to get him out of the lineup. So if he does sit out tonight, it's got to be relatively bad for sure. Apparently, youngster Leon Bichel has been told by the Stars to be on standby and be ready just in case. Looks like he'll be the one to go in should Tanev not be able to go. Of course, the series tonight shifts down to Dallas. The Oilers were, by far the better team after a slow start in the last game. Obviously, this is going to be a huge one because the next game, one of these two teams will be facing elimination. The Oilers had to do that in the last series against the Canucks where they were forced to win Game 6 and Game 7. So we know they can face adversity. We know they can overcome it. But I'm sure from their perspective, they'd rather not. But the Stars team will be looking to bounce back and see if they can't take a 3-2 series lead. There might be a change for the Oilers. It hasn't been confirmed as of yet, but it looks like Derek Ryan might be out tonight and Sam Carrick might be heading in. So we'll see on that front. Of course, last night we saw the Florida Panthers win Game 5 and take a 3-2 series lead over the Rangers. First period was fairly entertaining, but no scoring. It was a fairly even period. The Rangers ended up scoring first in the second off a shorthanded goal from Chris Kreider. It was a really nice goal on a shorthanded breakaway. They get a 1-0 lead. Unfortunately for the Rangers, that's all they could get all night, and it wasn't really because Bobrovsky was that outstanding. They just really, again, their top players are failing to produce a lot of offensive chances. It's just that simple. Florida's doing a really good job defensively. They're doing a good job in the neutral zone. They've killed off penalties. And the Rangers are just not... it's a combination of Florida doing really good things, but it's also a combination, nothing of the Rangers just not having it right now, offensively speaking. They go into the second period, and then, of course, we saw Gustav Forsling tie it up, later into that period after they get the shorthanded goal, tie game, going into the third, and you would think with the Rangers, wanting to put a push to be able to grab that game, and they didn't get the push in the third. Anton Lundell scores earlier in the period to take a lead for the Panthers, and then it stayed that way until Sam Bennett hit the empty netter late with the goalie out to seal it up 3-1. Shots overall were 37-27 for Florida. Even in the third period when the game was on the line, they outshot the Rangers 16-10. Matt Rempe only played 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Seems like a bit of a waste, whereas some of their top guys, when you're looking at Kreider's bench, Jed Panarin, all those guys are up around 23-24 minutes. So not sure I entirely agree with the distribution of ice time, but obviously I'm not Peter Laviolette, but I'm not going to argue with his choices here. But I just find it odd, and a little bit, and some of the defensive coverage has been odd as well, and they're just not generating. So they really need to have their best game of the year of the next one, clearly, because Game 6 now, they face elimination. Now, back to the Oilers for a quick second. Troy Stecher, who they had acquired as a depth defenseman, he had played a little bit in the playoffs, did have ankle surgery, and he is done for the year. So I know the Oilers are looking at options to maybe change up their D after a rough game there against the Stars. They really didn't have Stecher as an option to go in. It was really Broberg, or you're really getting well deeper into the depth beyond that. So we'll see. Hopefully Stecher can be ready to go next year. He will be looking for a contract as he is a pending UFA. A big change in Minnesota on the staff of the Wild. Longtime assistant coach Darby Hendrickson has been let go by Bill Guerin and the staff there in Minnesota. Darby Hendrickson feels like he's been a lifelong, basically, member of that Wild team. He played there for 4 years and then ended up being an assistant coach for, what has he been? I think it's about 13 years now. I think it was 2011 when he started coaching. He's worked under, I think, a lot of coaches. For one, like there's not too many coaches in Wild history that he hasn't worked with. So at the end of the day, like a long time, member of that organization between his playing days and his coaching days. Obviously, with new coach John Hines taking over later into last year, this is most likely a case of him wanting to bring in one of his guys or somebody that he'd like to bring on. And Hendrickson is the victim here to be let go so that they can make the change, considering he's been there the longest and withstood a lot of coaches. So I'm not sure what the future holds for Darby Hendrickson, but certainly will be a little bit weird for Minnesota fans not to see him on the bench upcoming season. The Montreal Canadiens today also announced the signing of one of their prospects, and that's Jared Davidson. He gets a 2-year entry-level contract. The 21-year-old had a pretty good season playing in Laval this past year. In 38 games, he was the third highest scoring rookie on the team. He played there on an AHL-only deal, so he didn't have your traditional two-way entry-level contract, so he had the option of being called up to the NHL. But Davidson certainly put in his time. He's worked really hard. Like I said, had a fairly impressive first year in the American League, so certainly a well-deserved 2-year entry-level deal. Some players heading to Europe. We know one for sure, maybe another, both involving the Ottawa Senators. The Sens have had Jacob Larson on their team for the past couple of years after coming over from Anaheim. He's really been a depth piece for the most part. Played a little bit in the NHL, but more so at the AHL level, and he's opted to sign overseas in the Swiss League. So it makes sense. I mean, his contract was up. He knew that with the new general manager, the new owner, they're going to be revamping things, and based on the depth there in Ottawa, he's really at best in most NHL teams like a 7-8 guy. So it makes sense that he might be able to head over to Europe, make a bigger paycheck, and get a better role. So makes sense. I'm not shocked to hear that he's done that. So he's gone for sure. There is speculation that their captain from Belleville in the AHL last year, defenseman Dylan Hetherington, may also be doing the same thing. May not end up in the Swiss League, but somewhere in Europe. He's weighing over options right now. Again, an older veteran player, mostly getting AHL time. He has seen some NHL time with the Sens in the past couple of years, but certainly not, either of these guys are not guys you're going to be looking to for, the future. Like, they're already in their later 20s. So certainly guys that were great veteran leaders in the American Hockey League were a good help to some of the younger D down there that are developing. But makes sense that they might be able to find, like I said, more money, bigger roles elsewhere, even if that involves heading to Europe. One name to watch as well in the trade front for the Sens is defenseman Erik Brannstrom. Bruce Garriock is reporting that the pending restricted free agent is likely going to get moved after looking at their left side defense. Certainly they have Sanderson, Shabbat, Chychrun. There's some uncertainty around Chychrun, of course, as we know. He's been one of the names mentioned in the rumor mill because of his contract not being more than 1 year right now. So we don't know what the cost to retain his services are going to be, and it might prove to be too much to have another left-hand D making a ton of money because you've already got Sanderson and Shabbat both making $8 million. To add somebody else looking for similar money, it just doesn't make sense. So as much as they'd like the player, it's boils down to cap gymnastics, and that they need a different defenseman who can play the other side, different role. And really, at the same time, I think when they acquired him, of course it was the old regime, but I think the hope was that he could play the right side, and that didn't really work out the greatest this year. So we'll see. But certainly Brannstrom is also a left D. They want a different style of defenseman for that third pair. Brannstrom can't just turn into a 6'4" guy overnight. But they do have Tyler Cleven waiting in the wings, who put in a year in the minors, obviously played some college hockey and looks ready to make the jump. So they certainly want to add some size and strength back there. Brannstrom is not that. He's a smaller, good skating defenseman who can move the puck. But there have been times on the PK and boxing out in front of the net and things like that he does struggle with. But I do think in the right role, that he can play in the NHL. I really do. But just, I don't think his future is with the Sens. So Garriock expects that Brandstrom is a good option to be traded before the draft or at the draft. I do wonder about a possibility of seeing a trade between Ottawa and the Los Angeles Kings. The Kings have a forward there in Arthur Kaliev, who's in a similar boat, has proven at times that he can be a good goal scorer, but seems to fall out of favor, just not the complete player, which I know may not exactly fit what the Sens want in a forward group, but if they're going to, what's the best they're going to get in terms of a draft pick or a prospect that hasn't really played in the NHL for Brandstrom, whose value wouldn't be super high? It's hard to say, right? If they can get a player that's got a taste of the NHL, has shown some promise, even though there's parts of his game you'd like to see change or get better, it might be a better risk to having a player work out than, getting a third-round pick or another player who's less established, right? So we'll see. It depends on, how things go. I wouldn't be shocked if he was packaging another deal with some other pieces that might bring him back something else too. So hard to say, but, in Kaliev, you could probably justify doing a swap there. I mean, you got a similar age player, a defenseman in Brandstrom who's looking for a different role. His former head coach, DJ Smith's now working in Los Angeles. So I don't know how DJ, if he loved Brandstrom or really liked a lot of his game, but if he did, maybe he would be somebody that would be interested in bringing him over there. Of course, he's going to be coaching the D as well. And Kaliev, like I said, could be a goal-scoring player to play in the top 9 for the Sens and get a chance. I mean, certainly there's lots of aspects of Kaliev's game. Like coming out of junior, he looked like he could be a real solid goal scorer. He's got a wicked shot, but again, not a complete player. There's aspects of his game that you'd like to see improve, but not to say that the coaching staff and everybody in Ottawa couldn't work with him to help him become that. So to me, it makes a lot of sense, but it's not, absolutely slam dunk perfect that we see that go down. But I do wonder if those two teams with all the connections there would talk and see a swap of those two players. So we'll see. In Ottawa, also expected to maybe move prospect Igor Sokolov, who's been in the system now for a number of years, a player that they like, but it's just hard to find a role for him. Ability to score is there. The skating is still rough, even though he's worked a little bit on it with skating coaches and whatnot. And I think it sounds like that he's open to maybe signing in Ottawa, but he wants more opportunity. And if he's not going to get that in Ottawa, then he'd like them to trade him somewhere where he will. But they will definitely give him a qualifying offer because he is an RFA. They certainly don't want to lose him for nothing, for sure. So we'll see what the future holds for Sokolov in Ottawa and if they may be parting ways as well. And onto some other rumors around the NHL. Is it possible that Dakota Joshua may have priced himself out of Vancouver? There's certainly mutual interest to bring him back, and it's not a given that he won't return to Vancouver, but I think it's fair to say after the way he finished the season and had a pretty good showing in the playoffs, I think he opened up a lot of teams to being interested in him and showing what he can do. The problem with Joshua, in my opinion, is he still struggles with consistency. Had his best NHL season for sure. Opened a lot of eyes, got some attention. Right now, according to the Daily Faceoff contract predictor, he's probably looking at a multi-year deal, 2 to 3 years. Probably around that $2.5 million mark. So certainly a player who a lot of teams could justify paying that to play on their third line. He's got the size and the strength and the ability to go to the net and score. Had his best output offensively, and said he's got that big body and the willingness to take a bump, go to the net, and do the gritty work that some guys just can't do. So there's lots to like there. He was originally a Toronto Maple Leaf draft pick and chose to stay in school and played out his full 4 years and became a free agent. And of course, ultimately never signed with Toronto. So there's some people that said if he hits free agency that, well, there's a team he'd never go to. He had the chance to go there and didn't take it. But that's not really the case. According to James Myrtle and James Seigel, who have a Leafs-based podcast, both, of course, writers for The Athletic, they say that that's not the case at all. When Joshua chose not to sign in Toronto, it was really because of, at the time, a lot of their star players now were younger, and they just had a pretty deep forward group. I mean, the expectations were a little different on that team at the time. A lot of the other guys that have since moved on were there, and it was a deep group, and he just didn't really feel that it was a good place for him to be able to get NHL time. So he chose to go elsewhere and find that, which took a while for him to kind of bounce around and get that right opportunity. He's done well under Rick Tocchet in Vancouver, so I'm sure he's going to factor that in too. But Vancouver has they have a lot of expiring contracts. It's just the way it is. And they're not going to be the same team next year. They're definitely going to have a fair bit of new faces and some turnover. Joshua may or may not be one of those guys. There is talk that Tyler Myers might be agreeing to a 2 or 3 year contract extension in that $2.5 to $3 million range. So we'll see about that. But, Lindholm's likely not coming back. At least it looks that way right now. Joshua's another guy that's questionable. It really is. So, I wouldn't rule out the possibility if you look at where things are at in Toronto. And, of course, Craig Berube, who has familiarity and experience with Dakota Joshua and seen how he's progressed and how the Leafs certainly could use that type of player. I mean, they've already, brought in guys like Bertuzzi and Domi who can play a little bit more of a grittier style. And at the end of the day, we don't know for sure if they're staying or not right now. So there's a lot of balls in the air. There's a lot of things that can change. But I would not rule out the possibility of Joshua being a player that the Leafs take a long, hard look at. And just because he never signed there before doesn't mean he wouldn't do it again. So we'll see where that goes. But the Canucks will certainly have a lot of competition for retaining his services. There's another player I want to keep an eye on as well as Capo Caco, the Rangers. We certainly don't know a ton about what the future holds there because they're still in the playoffs. Of course, as we know, they now trail the Panthers 3-2. They're facing elimination. They could have their season wrap up here in a few days unless they come back in that series. And we'll probably get more clarity on some of these players. And the rumor mill will probably either pick up or cool down on some of these guys once that happens. But Caco's a player to watch. 2 years ago at 40 points, looked like he was trending in a big direction. Him and Lafreniere were both kind of taking steps. This year, Lafreniere took a big step and really solidified himself in the top 6. Got more opportunity under Laviolette. And Caco suffered a setback, only appearing in fewer games because of injury and only putting up 19 points. He's got 300 NHL games to his resume now, only 117 points. It just really hasn't worked out, but I really believe a lot of it, I'm not saying it's not on a player, because I think it is, but a lot of this, I think, is on his utilization. I really wonder if he had a team that gave him a true opportunity to consistently play in the top 6 with some more offensive-minded players, if he would thrive. So again, another guy to watch. Like I said, 23 years old, number 2 overall pick in the Jack Hughes draft. A number of years ago, went straight to the NHL. Looked like he was NHL ready, and him and Lafreniere both, for the longest time, they were third-line players, and they were both looking like they could possibly end up being in that bust category. Some people were way too quick to call it that. At the end of the day, Lafreniere was referred to that way too early. Now look at him. He's thriving. He's showing like he could be a star player, whereas Caco had his moments, but is struggling to do that consistently. Considering Caco is where he's at in his career, I think right now, unfortunately, he's trending more towards being a bust than Lafreniere, but it's still, I think it's too early to call him that. I really think that, he needs a little bit more time and a new scenery. It just hasn't worked out in Big Apple. So it's hard to say where he could go. I haven't seen him linked to any specific teams yet, mainly because the Rangers are still playing. There's been less talk about him, but he's even had a few games in the playoffs where he's been scratched. So it's just, I don't think his future is there. I really don't. So we'll see. But another name to watch here for a younger player, pending RFA, that could be moved. And of course, in Montreal, we talked a bit before about Patrick Laine maybe being a target. There's more talk today through TVA Sports talking about that possibility, of course. With Don Waddell taking over things in Columbus, there's bound to be activity. I know he's done some interviews. He did one on the Jeff Merrick show after being fully announced here as the new director of hockey operations and president and GM for the Jackets, and essentially said that at this point you can probably expect there to be a fair bit of change. He mentioned you could see maybe upwards of 5 or more new faces in the lineup come the fall. Sounded like he wanted to focus on cleaning up the defensive aspect of the team game first, and maybe revamp the blue line before they do too much tackling of the other positions. Well, we know that moving a guy like Laine could do that. If Montreal were to be the team that made that trade, they have tons of defense. Yeah, you could get some real good-looking young D there that could be of interest. I mean, you have multiple first-round picks in Montreal. They have the Jets' first-rounder as well as their own, all those young defensemen. They have the ability to take his contract on. But Montreal's been linked to so many top young guys. They're not going to get them all. Clearly, between whether it be Laine or Natchez or Zegras or any of these guys, Caco to some degree, probably less likely. Who are they really going to zone in on? And a lot of it's probably going to depend on price tag. But, in all honesty, I think this is a player that very well could be a terrific fit in a number of places, but you worry about his injuries, you worry about his time missed. How did everything go in a player assistance program? Where is he at with everything on and off the ice? You got to do some due diligence and see where things are at that way. But Laine is a player that has been out there for needing a fresh start for some time. With the further talk today that he could be a target for the Montreal Canadiens, it just seems to be picking up steam. More and more outlets are talking about it and naming him as a potential target. So I do wonder what that could hold. I mean, he's got the size, he's got the skill. We know he can score goals. If they could rehabilitate this player, it could be an absolute steal. Because right now, I'm sure the Jackets are looking at this as a bit of a liability of a contract. His value is down, so trading him kind of sucks in that sense that you're not going to get as much for him. But if Don Waddell could push a hard bargain based on his past history, not so much his recent past, but his overall body of work, where he has had some great seasons, especially during his time with the Winnipeg Jets. So we'll see. I do think he could be a prime target for the Habs, but there's other players out there that could be as well, so it's hard to say what direction they go in. So let me know your thoughts on the possibility of Laine being the Habs target for a trade around the NHL draft this summer. Let me know your thoughts. We'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.